Today's video is sponsored by Surfshark VPN. Hello and welcome back to The Drag Detective, where today we are going to be doing something a little bit different, but something very fun and something that I've been working on now for a little while. So if you are not aware of what an iceberg is, I actually looked up the Urban Dictionary definition of it, and it says that an iceberg is a chart that sorts facts/theories from a piece of media by obscurity, usually the most commonly known subjects near the tip of the iceberg, and the lesser known subjects being near the abyss. So if you have not seen any of these iceberg videos, there's icebergs about lost media, about conspiracy theories, about like everything under the entire sun someone has made an iceberg for. And it's basically just looking at some like lesser known information about a topic, with the very top of the iceberg being stuff that's more commonly known, and then the stuff at the bottom of the iceberg being more like secretive, not many people know about it, it's very hush-hush. So if you see a red dot appear on my forehead in this video, we all know what's going on. But someone on Reddit made a drag race iceberg. Specifically, I want to shout out the specific iceberg, because there's a couple of them. I'll be using the one made by Reddit user myhatrules. So thank you so much for making this iceberg. I can't wait to dive into all of it. And in this video, we are going to go topic by topic. I will give you the tea behind all of these weird drag race anomalies and facts and little events that have happened throughout the time of the show. And as we get deeper and deeper, it will get weirder and weirder. But first, now, solving internet mysteries is a lot easier with a VPN. So I'm especially grateful to today's video sponsor, Surfshark VPN. Surfshark is a VPN which keeps your online identity safe by encrypting all the information that travels between your device and the internet. It also allows for you to travel anywhere in the world virtually. You can swap your location with anywhere else you want in the entire world. Now, this is very good for watching Drag Race, which I have to do a lot, obviously, for this channel, and all of you other US fans know that it is basically impossible to find all of Drag Race on streaming services here in the US. So I can very easily just change my location to somewhere else in the world in order to find Drag Race episodes a lot easier. And I can do that without being worried about my personal information being spread across the internet, because Surfshark gives you an alert whenever any of your personal information is in danger. If you want to try Surfshark VPN for yourself, you can use the code DRAGDETECTIVE and get 83% off plus 3 months free. Plus, Surfshark has a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can try it out without any risk at all. To try it out for yourself, check the link in the description below. Thank you so much to Surfshark VPN, and now back to the video. Now, there will be a couple topics I'm not going to talk on just because they're just kind of in bad taste, in my personal opinion. Things I'm not comfortable discussing. There's only a couple of them, and it's really nothing that I think anyone doesn't already know. So I will link the image and the Reddit post in the description below. So if you notice a couple things on the iceberg that you're like, oh, Derek didn't mention this, it's because I just kind of was like, it's self-explanatory. I don't want to get into Queen's like personal traumas and things like that. So that is the only thing we'll be skipping. So at the very tippy top of the iceberg, we're going to start with every queen is filmed getting crowned. So this is pretty much well known by now. Ever since season 4, specifically after season 3, where up until that point, they'd only just filmed a single crowning, whichever queen won the season. They filmed that and they moved on with their lives. Well, Perez Hilton leaked that Raja won season 3, and it kind of spread all over the internet, spoiled the season for a lot of people. So then once they started doing the live finales on season 4, they record each of the finalists getting their crowning moment so that the queens don't know who won, the audience doesn't know who won. At that point, maybe the producers don't even know who won. The only time that they'll know who won is when it airs on television. That way there's no way to spoil it. There's no way that the winner of the season can get leaked. Nothing like that. So queens like Peppermint, queens like Eureka O'Hara and Cameron Michaels, they've all had crownings filmed. And actually a couple of these images have leaked to the internet from people who were at the live finale tapings of queens who didn't end up winning their season still getting their moment with the crown and the scepter and walking down the runway. Prance Queen. Up next, we have the show is filmed a year in advance. the show is filmed a year in advance. It takes time to edit and to map out how the storylines are going to go and what confessionals they're going to choose, what storylines are going to ditch. Like, obviously, this is what happens with all television. So, yeah. Villain edits is, I think, referring to how specifically queens like Roxy and Fifi, who are regarded as like the greatest villains of all time in Drag Race, definitely had some things taken out of context in their edit, or maybe a two-sided rivalry like between Jinx and Roxy. All of Jinx's nasty remarks towards Roxy get cut, and Jinx ends up looking like the poor victim while Roxy looks like she's bullying Jinx. Basically, it's just showing that there's more behind the scenes to a villain edit than what we see. There might just be nastiness, but sometimes there is more context that we are missing. Queens get a list of outfits when they get cast for the show. So obviously these queens don't just have all of these runway categories sitting in their closets. So when they get cast on the show, they get a couple of weeks beforehand a list of everything they're going to need, from challenge performances to just regular things for like mini challenges, or like you should bring this many boy outfits plus all of the runway categories for the season. That way they have like, sometimes it's 2 weeks or 3 weeks to get all of those things together, to talk to designers. Confessionals are filmed at the end of every day. So this specific Iceberg was put out 2 years ago, which means that some of this stuff might be different now. I know from watching Jan's kind of series that she did on her TikTok that on her seasons, they filmed the confessionals in the morning. So they would get to set at like 6 or 7, record confessionals until maybe like 11 or 10 or whatever, and then they would record the challenge or the eliminations or whatever it may be that day. And that's why in more recent seasons, you'll see a lot of queens with a coffee cup in their confessionals, like chatting with their coffee, because they're filming them in the morning. So past seasons, I guess they filmed them at night. Now they film them in the mornings. We are reaching the next level of the Iceberg. This stuff is a little, I guess you would say, less obvious. You might have to do a little bit of digging to figure out what is going on. The first one is Willem's disqualification. And, I mean, Willem has talked about this a lot now on Race Chaser, on Twitter, on, interviews with people like Joseph Shepard. But the gist of it is that Willem had a show that she really wanted to do, and knew that the season was going to be filming overlapping with that show she wanted to do. So she knew she needed to go at like around 6th or 7th place based on when filming would go. And she was going to do as well as she could beforehand, and then she was going to ditch and make good TV, and that's what she did. So she started breaking a lot of rules, stealing stuff or what have you, and they basically were like, yeah, you're done. And she's like, okay, perfect, because I didn't want to be here anyway. I got to go do this thing where I'm going to get paid a lot more than I am per episode of this show. And she left. That doesn't look good or sound like a good story necessarily, which is why they did the conjugal visit thing for the finale, when RuPaul's like, why did Willem get disqualified? That just makes sense from, I guess, Willem's perspective and from the shows, because it makes both of them look not that bad. Because, I mean, Willem was also calling out things like the girls not getting good food or enough food, or food options that, like, for the vegan contestants. Like, there was just a lot of, like, nastiness going on both ends behind the scenes. So this was a good story that paints both parties in a good light. And, now years later, we know the truth. But at the time, it was kind of more hush-hush secret. The queens are taped into their hotel rooms. I don't know if any of y'all had this, but when we went on a DC trip in middle school, they taped our hotel room doors so that they could tell if we left, because like the tape would rip. That's what they do for the girls in their hotel rooms. They put a thing of masking tape or whatever have you on their doors so that they know that no one is leaving, in the middle of the night or sneaking out, and especially in more recent seasons where they're definitely more stringent on like who the queens are allowed to talk to and who they're allowed to see and when and what and where they're allowed to go and things like that. NDAs, it's pretty self-explanatory. The queens have to sign an NDA before they go on the show, just like basically any other show. And it's basically just saying you can't leak shit. Things that we are discussing on the show should stay behind closed doors. And, depending on who the queens are, they might be a little more or a little less lenient on the NDA process. But, I mean, there's videos on YouTube about specifically the Drag Race NDA. So if you want more information on that, it is out there. Elliot's racism and transphobia on set. I see there's things like when you're really deep in the fandom, you think everyone knows this, but then constantly like people will be like, why does everyone hate Elliot? Or what's wrong with Elliot? Da, da, da. So I guess there are a lot of people that don't just know these like more behind the scenes stuff. Basically, Elliot said some transphobic remarks, some racist remarks on set of season 13, and was called out by Candy Muse specifically. And you can kind of see, you know, in this famous clip now where the final four are reacting to Elliot in the finale. They are like,
come on, Lala. Baby. Yeah. Rich, mama.
On Twitter, a couple of them have said things, specifically Candy Muse, kind of detailing what Elliot said. And, you know, I don't really want to get into all of that. You can look it up if you want. But basically, Elliot was just not very conscious of the things they were saying. And hopefully they've changed and, you know, learned to be more cognizant of the words that they're using and the language that they're using. But yeah, it's not anywhere in the edit on season 13. You would never know that happened, but, you know, it became very apparent afterwards. Max's unflattering edit is referring to Max's elimination episode. And, you know, Max is a very interesting person in Drag Race lore because they were doing so well. They had 2 challenge wins in 5 episodes, and then suddenly they were cut at Snatch Game and gone and have never come back to the show. Literally not even for an appearance, like never seen on the show again. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that Max got kind of a weird edit on their elimination episode that was, I guess, kind of meant to show like, hey, she should go home because she's a weirdo, where she is having a panic attack in her corset. She asks if they can pause filming for a second so she can loosen it and just catch her breath. And then she sits at the end of the stage. RuPaul asks her, hey, why don't you sing a little bit of a song for me, just to kind of, you know, get Max into a better space, get her mind out of what's going on. Max sings for RuPaul, and RuPaul's like, oh, that was lovely. Are you okay? Go back to film, and let's go back and film. Now, on the show, all we see is Max being like, oh, I need to take my corset off. I'm going to sit at the end of the stage and start singing, and everyone's like, weirdo. But that is not what happened. Max has, you know, gone on to say, this is exactly what happened, and they edited me to look like a crazy person to justify me going home, which checks out for what we know about production in the show. But it's definitely sad for Max, and I think it's really led to them not really having a great relationship with WoW, and maybe why we haven't seen them come back in any capacity on the show. Candy Ho's invisible edit. I looked around the internet a lot for this, like maybe if there was like a reason for it or like a secret reason or whatever. I really couldn't find anything. So if you guys can, you know, suss out why this is on the Iceberg, or if it's just, you know, hey, did you know Candy Ho was on season 7? You can put it in the comments below, and I'll pin it if, you know, I see something that's like, oh, okay, that's what I was missing. Because, yeah, some of these are kind of vague and hard to just, like, look up. Runways are filmed twice. The first time they do it with music so that they can kind of, like, you know, bop around and have some, you know, ambiance to, like, strut to. And then the second time they do it, it is completely silent. And that is when the judges do their jokes. So I'm imagining it's kind of awkward because you're just like walking. It's kind of like those edits where you just hear the footsteps. They have to film everything twice so that they can get both the judges' comments and enough footage to make sure they can put together the perfect, like, package for the runways. Copywritten characters are not allowed for Snatch Game because if, let's say, Bianca Del Rio doing Dora the Explorer in her audition tape, if she were to bring that to the show, the producers of Dora could potentially sue and say, hey, this is like a kid's cartoon that you're now painting in a raunchy light. That's why, like, even on SNL and things, like, if they're gonna, like, directly make fun of something or parody something, they have to change the name. And on something like Snatch Game, like, let's say she calls herself, Isadora, like, it just is kind of weird because, like, the name is right there on the, like, they're supposed to be playing someone, so it just kind of gets rid of all of the weirdness. Miranda Sings hasn't been allowed to be used. There's a couple other characters where, like, production shuts it down, but we also have seen a couple times where they are playing a copywritten character, but instead they'll just play as the actor behind it. to kind of get around that rule. Queens get an iPod with lip sync songs on it. They're not allowed to have electronics or phones or whatever. Like, if they want to use their phone, it needs to be for a very specific purpose, and they are monitored the entire time. So they get those little like iPod Nanos that don't even have like access to internet or like a screen. And they load it with the lip sync songs. They load it with like musical numbers or girl group songs and things that they need to learn ahead of time. And they get that at the beginning of the season so they can learn the lip syncs ahead of time. But as we know, there are plenty of lip sync songs that they put on those iPods that they end up not using. Queens go into debt spending money for runway categories. I mean, we've seen plenty of queens say how much they spent. And, you know, some of them like Raja O'Hara are like, yeah, I didn't spend that much. And then you have others like Aquaria who are like, yeah, I dropped a lot of money. It is an expensive decision to make to go on Drag Race. And you kind of have to hope that the bookings that you get afterwards, if you're not winning the cash prize, are going to kind of pay off all of that money that you put into your runways. And from what we've heard, I think most of the time it does, as long as you make any type of impact at all. But it still is a very big investment to go on Drag Race. Now we are in our third category. This stuff is getting definitely more random. It's less about production and more just like random things. First, we have RuPaul's sweatpants. Utica obviously makes the joke during the roast, hey, RuPaul, why don't you stand up? And RuPaul flicks her off because RuPaul, after filming her runway and, you know, her part on the main stage, she will throw on sweatpants and slippers and sit behind the desk and no one would ever know. And can you blame the bitch? I can't. Nothing you say matters unless those cameras are rolling is in reference to a very famous YouTube video from the talk show Hey Queen, where Pearl kind of goes over the story of why she was going to quit, why she had that stare off with Ru, and she basically went up to RuPaul and was like, hey, like, you have changed my life, like, I've looked up to you for so long, like, just thank you so much for having me here. And RuPaul says, nothing you say matters unless those cameras are rolling. Now, from RuPaul's perspective, you know, she is making a show. She knows that these kind of moments are things you want to capture on camera. From Pearl's perspective, her, you know, lifelong idol just said, don't talk to me unless we're rolling. And so I can see both perspectives. Could RuPaul be nicer about it? Yes. Could Pearl maybe have, like, understood the bigger picture of what's going on around her? Yes. But it led to what we had, you know, happen, and to Pearl's really bad relationship with WoW, where, you know, I don't think we'll ever see her back, and I don't think she would ever want to come back. This one, let's just say you've got Mailgate, because I don't feel comfortable saying the original title of this. Courtney Act called it out, caused enough controversy around it. I think Carmen Carrera also said things about it, and the show changed it to, like, she'd already had hers in place of it. But it also led to Courtney Act being kind of blacklisted from the show a little bit. Her and Ru kind of got into it over this. And it kind of is just a moment of the show where it's like, sometimes society progresses faster than television. And this was just one of those cases. Jinx actually stood up for herself against Roxy, I alluded to earlier. The fight between Roxy and Jinx was definitely more of a two-sided rivalry where they were both throwing jabs, they were both engaging in nasty behavior, but we only saw Roxy's, you know, part in that, and, you know, they edited Jinx to look like the helpless victim. Jinx has mentioned this, Roxy has mentioned this, Alaska has mentioned this. Everyone that was there is like, yes, it was definitely more of like a two-sided thing that we only saw one side of. And, you know, it is unfortunate because to this day, Roxy Andrews is still getting nonstop hate for people who are just watching season 5 for the first time. But it also did make for really good TV, so... Congratulations, Raja is alluding to when Mariah Paris Balenciaga, Mariah Successful, is eliminated on season 3. Her mirror message says, congratulations, Raja. And as we know, Raja ends up winning that season. A lot of people use that as evidence that the show is scripted, or that the elimination order and the winner is kind of decided from the start. And while I definitely can see this, I think it was more of the fact that it was just very obvious that Raja was doing super well. Production loved Raja. RuPaul loved Raja. Raja was, you know, friends with RuPaul for years. She was probably the biggest name on that cast. It just kind of made sense that Raja was going to win. And in kind of a bitter moment where you're going home and you're like, Congratulations, Raja. We all know you're going to win. So it is one of those moments where it's like, how much of this is really, reality and how much of it is scripted? I tend to think that it was more of just a clever guess than anything else. But other people think it's not. The walls of the workroom are fabrics. It makes sense. It's a really pretty pattern. And, they have those fabric walls. So why not just throw that shit up on the wall? The season 3 queens had extra time to work on their Moneyball looks. This is another one I really couldn't find any information on, like whether who said it or why or any of that. So if you know any of this information, drop it in the comments. It's kind of self-explanatory. They got extra time to make the Moneyball looks, but as to why, maybe it was because they were using a difficult medium to like create with. Detox and Ivy helped Jinx with her makeup. Is pretty self-explanatory. Jinx's makeup on the early episodes of, season 5 was, it was rough. It was definitely rough. And as the season progresses, it gets better because she got help. Vivacious's entrance flub was planned. I definitely could see this happening where, like, she practices it, zipping it down and revealing. And the producers are like, oh, this is kind of a funny gimmick if you're like, oh no, I can't open it. And Vivacious is like, okay, because if the producers tell you to do something, you have to do it. Jujubee caused untucked drinks to be limited. If you watch Jujubee's lip sync, specifically the Black Velvet and the Give Me Something You Can Feel, she's trashed. And so after this, after season 2, they limit how many drinks you're allowed to have. And, some seasons, I think they get a little less stringent on it, and sometimes they're more hardcore on, like, you need to stop. I think it kind of depends on the vibe of the group. There is tea from season 15 that they encourage the girls to drink as much as they want. And looking at some of these untucks we've been getting recently, that kind of checks out. But for a while there, they were only allowed to have, like, 1 or 2 drinks. And Jan even mentioned, I don't remember if she said All-Star 6 they were less lenient, or on season 12 they were less lenient, but one of her seasons they could only have 1 or 2, and the other they could have more if they wanted, as long as they weren't like going crazy. Another one I could not find anything on. It makes me annoyed because like this one sounds juicy and I just can't find any information on it. Letters under their hotel door. What's the tea? Drop it in the comments if you know, because this is one I really do want to know the tea on. Production made Britta and Jan change their drag names. Britta's full name is Britta Filter. Jan's full name is Jan Sport. They're both copywritten. And, there's other queens that have names like, Mariah Balenciaga or a Curious Chanel Davenport, where, like, it's fine, but in whatever the case for this was, it wasn't, so they had to change them. Producers knew about Dela's whiteout. This, I think, is very obvious because, like, when there's cameras going on, there's not anything that the producers aren't going to be privy to or aren't going to catch. So I think for sure they saw her do it and they're like, okay, well, damn. Then we have to make sure she wins the lip sync so that we have this amazing moment. And do I think that they paid BB to take her wig off and ruin the lip sync where she was very clearly winning? I personally do. Now, no one has ever said anything like that has happened, but I can kind of just connect the dots in my head, and I think that makes sense. Especially considering that it was Thorgy's whiteout. So Ben has to go up to Thorgy, ask her for the whiteout. Thorgy has to go get the whiteout, then go give it to Ben, and then Ben has to go take it and do, like, there's no way that that whole thing was not seen by a single producer, by a single helper backstage, or directors or cameramen. Like, people knew what was going on, and they saw the moment that was going to happen, and they said, let's let it go. Let's let it ride. Jada was a last-minute alternate. Our winner, season 12, almost didn't make it. Someone had to pull out, and Jada was then replaced. And, they have alternates on all seasons, but usually they won't be used. And in this case, Jada had much less time to get ready than everybody else, but she still managed to outshine, like, most of that entire cast. This one is one of my favorite, like, random weird stories. Jocelyn Fox had no dark foundation in the makeover challenge. So season 6's makeover is the bride one, where they're making over brides. Jocelyn has, like, the worst time ever in history. There's so many things that went wrong. The guy that she was with was homophobic. He cheated on his wife, and as revenge, she made him do this. So he was pissed. He didn't want to be there. He was a jerk. And also, because Trinity K. Bonet had just been eliminated and she was the last black contestant left on that season, they took out all of the foundation and, makeup for those darker skin tones out of the workroom. And so Jocelyn then had nothing to work with when she had the only black makeover partner. Looking at his makeup, it is like 10 shades lighter than it should be, and he looks like a corpse, and that's why. And I think it's, it's clear that they wanted Jocelyn gone. Jocelyn was not going to win that season, and she was the only one left that didn't have, like, a solid storyline or a solid, like, standing in the competition. And I think that was just one of their ways of, like, ensuring that was going to happen. Queens not receiving prize items. I've seen a couple queens mention this, especially in the earlier seasons when they were winning, like, trips or, like, dresses from this or jewels from this, like, these random small companies. Sometimes they would never receive it, and they were just like, okay. Unused runway prompts on season 10. This is a thing for every, like, current season. They always ask for more runways than they're going to need, because let's say there's one that a lot of people just bring something that's not good. They're not going to want that on television. So they can kind of look at what everyone brought for all of the categories and say, okay, we're not going to use this one, we're not going to use this one or this one. And for season 10, there were 3 of them. And it was kind of like a thing at the time, because I don't know if it was the first time this happened, but it was the first time that queens had been talking about it. There was an orange alert runway, there was a French, like, design chic runway, and then there was a prehistoric runway. The prehistoric looks were used in the Twin Challenge by Cracker and Cameron and Aquaria. The French ones were used by Aquaria for sure in that Twin Challenge. And the orange one was used by Asia, and then we saw a couple of other queens post some of these looks on Instagram throughout that season, since they just did photo shoots with all of the packages, everything in their package that they made, even the ones they ended up not using. So then they put those on Instagram and people connected the dots, and then people confirmed, and now it's just a thing. I think it was Aura on this past episode of Drag Race in the Roscoe's said that there was a monochromatic runway that they brought that they never ended up using. All Stars 1 was made for Chad to win. This one is rough, because when All Stars 1 was airing, Chad was definitely someone that the fandom liked, but on that cast was not the fan favorite or close to the fan favorite. So when she started winning all these challenges, and I think people saw some riggery involved, they ended up saying Chad was made to win All Stars 1. And, like, if Chad had won season 4, then the real winner of season 4 would come on All Stars and won All Stars. But since Chad didn't win season 4, he came back on All Stars and won. Like, it's one of those things we'll never know. There's evidence to show that, yes, just based on riggery, that was in Chad's favor on that season. But that whole season is it's a complete mess. I could do an entire video on, like, the riggery, not even the riggery, the behind-the-scenes buffoonery of All Stars 1. Shangela started the lipstick messages. So if you watch season 1, there's no lipstick messages when people, are eliminated and then do it on the mirror. But Shangela wanted to say goodbye to, I think, Sahara. And production was like, you're not allowed to say goodbye to anyone. Like, you have to go. So her way of saying goodbye was to write a message on the mirror. And production really liked that as, like, a, final goodbye. So they started implementing it throughout that season. And now it is just, like, a regular thing for the show. Shangela and Mimi's fight shut down production for 3 weeks. So this has been said by multiple queens. This definitely happened. And definitely the fight got more intense than what we saw. Might have gotten more physical than we saw, but there's never been any, like, cut and dry, like, this happened, and then we shut down. Like, it's just been alluded to, so someone should just leak the whole story at some point, but I kind of like that it's just this, like, mystery, like, well, whatever happened was so bad that production shut down for 3 weeks. And with that brings us to the end of part 1. I'm going to post-production split this into 2 because this video got really long. So for the second half of the Iceberg, which features a lot more of the, like, deeper, weirder, wildest stuff that I didn't even know about. I had to look up a lot of these and go, be the true drag detective. That will all be in part 2 for our bottom 4 tiers of this iceberg, which will be coming probably on Monday. So make sure you are subscribed to the channel so you don't miss it. I hope you enjoyed this kind of different video, but I just really love watching these iceberg videos. And then when I saw there was a drag race one, I was like, the drag detective has to do this, right? But if you are not aware, I currently have a podcast going, which you can find on all streaming platforms, Spotify, Apple Music, Google Podcasts, all of it, called The Rigged Recap, where every week I chat with some of my favorite Drag Race content creating friends about the newest episode of season 15. I've had Jack Fed, I've had Kayla Says, I've had Bootsy. This upcoming episode will feature Dr. Jake. I have some really fun guests coming later in the season, so I'm just very excited about this new podcast. Check it out. I will put the link in the description below, as well as all of the links to my social media, where you can follow me on TikTok, on Instagram, on Twitter. I'm kind of in a social media cleanse, but I'm still posting as much as I can. And thank you once again to Surfshark VPN for sponsoring today's video. You can use the code DRAGDETECTIVE to get 83% off, plus 3 months free, and all of that information is in the description below. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will catch you all in the next one.